Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to my interview with Pamela McDonough. I'm not very good with names. And we are going to be talking about both of our books. Mine is released on January the 28th, and Pamela's will be released on February the 11th. So to share them, mine is called The Complete Guide to Astrology, Understanding Yourself, Your Signs and Your Birth Chart. And Pamela's is called Vedic Astrology for Beginners, An Introduction to the Origins and Core Concepts of Jyotish. And the links are below on the video. And if you would like to go to Amazon to order your copies, they are going to be these books are both fabulous. So hop over to Amazon right now, order your copy, and enjoy the interview. Hello, everybody. I am Louise Edington of Cosmic Owl Astrology. So I am the Cosmic Owl. And today I am interviewing or talking with, we're chatting, Philippa McDonough. Yeah, correct. Who is an author from the same publishing company as I am. My new book is published by. So we decided to get together and talk about our books because mine is officially released on January the 28th. And I'm going to show you a picture of both covers so you can get the names and go order your books. And Philippa's is released on February.
Sorry.
Pamela, sorry. Pamela's book is released on February the 11th, and I have a thing about getting names wrong, so I apologize. Pamela.
Start with a P.
But I'm going to show the name and see the name of the book. So my book is called The Complete Guide to Astrology, Understanding Yourself, Your Signs and Your Birth Chart, and Pamela's is called Vedic Astrology for Beginners, an introduction to the origins and core and concepts of, and I never know how to say that word either. How do you say Jyotish? Jyotish. There we go. Because I'm not a Vedic astrologer. And I am reading a review copy of this book actually so that I can review it. But I've started on the PDF. But I need the hard copy because it's a whole new world to me, Vedic astrology. So I was really interested to talk to Pamela about it and just about the whole process of writing a book and having it out there as well. So from my perspective, I don't think there's many books out there for Vedic astrology for beginners, Pamela. So tell me about what you've brought into this book and how you've managed to bring it down to kind of beginner level.
Great question. Yeah, there are a number of, I think they would be considered beginners books out on the market, but they're still very complex because, as you know, astrology is a complex subject. And then additionally, when you get into Vedic astrology, there's the element of adding in a second language. Beyond just the language of astrology, there is the language of Sanskrit, which is part of learning Vedic astrology. And so I'm fortunate to have had a teacher from India for many years who was really excellent at breaking down the core concepts and helping me really understand a lot of the basics in a way that I could easily understand it, coming from the West and being a Westerner and having, been raised in the US and not raised in India, and having not spoken Sanskrit. And so I just took a lot of that methodology and how I learned. I learned from him. I also learned from other teachers as well, but he is my most recent and longest time teacher. But I really took a lot of that foundation work and concepts and put them in the book. And I tried to lay it out in a way that I would want to learn if I had to start all over again from ground zero.
Mm.
So in my mind, now that may not be in someone else's mind, right? What is the most logical? But in my mind, having, studied with a number of different teachers and read a gajillion books, right? The drill.
Oh yeah, and did you start in modern astrology, or did you?
I did. I started in Western astrology in the 90s, and I've been saying it's the late 90s, but I actually think it was the mid 90s based on some other research I've dug up. It was a while ago. So I did the Western for a few years, and I just, I didn't really get it. Like, I understood it, but it didn't click in with me the way that Vedic astrology clicked in with me.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if it's because, anybody who has studied Ayurveda, the medicine, natural medicine of India, or practice yoga, all of those systems just fit perfectly together. Mm-hmm. And so for me, when I came across Vedic astrology, I'd already been studying Ayurveda and yoga, and I'm like, well, this makes so much sense. It was, I don't want to say easy, because astrology is not easy, but it just felt right for me. And that was it. Like, I just went head first into it. And so I tried to go back into the memory banks mm-hmm. of, the books that I had read, because there are some outstanding books out there for people who are just learning, as you get deeper into it. But my book is a little bit different in a sense that I touch on, let's see here. It's been a while since I wrote it. I have to look at it. I touch on a little bit of the basics of Vedic astrology and, some of the history mm-hmm. of the Vedas, right? The ancient history, which is so important, right? Because in India, astrology is part of the spiritual tradition. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And then I just go into the very basics of the planets, or the grahas, and the signs of the zodiac, or the rashis, the houses and the bhavas, the nakshatras, which are the lunar mansions. There's 27 mansions of the moon that I think really sets Vedic astrology apart from Western astrology. Right. And then a little bit about, how to really start to understand a birth chart, just like the very first steps, because as well as I do, that it takes years.
Well, and I still think I learn something every day.
Oh, every client. I'm like, this is so awesome.
Exactly, yeah. I think that's what I love about astrology. It's like this endless rabbit hole of discovery. So it never keeps me feeling like I know everything.
Oh no, that's never going to happen for me. No. That's for sure, not in this lifetime.
Well, because now I'll be diving into your book and learning more about Vedic. So it's interesting. I kind of started probably a little bit earlier than you, but only a little bit, on my first Saturn return in 1989. A friend of mine had done some astrology classes, and she created my chart for me and did a little written reading, and I was hooked completely. I'd always been interested, but never had a proper astrology reading. And she gave me books, and I self-taught how to hand draw a chart and all that. But when I decided to actually follow, to become a professional astrologer, I kind of fell into evolutionary astrology, and that works for me because I'm kind of more of that psychological kind of energy. So I think all the ways work, and to my mind, I think you do the astrological ages, right, in Vedic astrology? So
the astrological ages. Are you talking about the cycles of the planets?
Like we're moving into the age of Aquarius.
Oh, not as much really as Western astrology. I think that's more of a Western astrology thing. Because so what planet are you using to pin on the age?
No one planet. It's
okay.
It's about precession of the ages backwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm going to do that.
yeah. So, but my theory is with the age of Aquarius, from the Western astrology perspective, is that Aquarius is a very ancient and modern sign because it's of it, and I believe it's going to start to integrate the ancient techniques like the Vedic and the Hellenistic and things into modern astrology. Whereas now we've got modern astrologers do this, Vedic astrologers do that, Hellenistic astrologers do that. I just see things really starting to merge, which is why I was really interested in kind of connecting with you and talking about it, because in my own book, I wrote it for the modern age, and I wanted to write it from a very inclusive perspective, and I ended up actually integrating the astrology of sect, which is a Hellenistic technique, but just the language of the astrology of sect into modern astrology. So that was my point about the ages. I didn't know if you did that. Can you see Vedic being able to kind of transform and grow into something a little bit more kind of open, or is it a very closed system, would you say?
I think that's a great question. I think it depends on who you're asking the question of.
Yes.
Truthfully, because I know that when I practice Vedic astrology, I don't practice it the same way necessarily that an astrologer from India would practice it. Because I don't have that upbringing and that cultural perspective. So I think, like, yoga coming to the West, there's been some good things about that and some not so good things about that, right? Like all of these wonderful and beautiful ancient traditions that do evolve eventually, but sometimes get lost in the shuffle. And I would hate to see the core of the tradition be lost, but I think everything has to evolve and change. And that brings me to a question for you, actually. Evolutionary astrology, when I hear that, I think of Jeffrey Wolf Green. Back in the day, I actually got to see him and did a workshop with him.
Lucky you.
Amazing, right? In Seattle, back at the old Astrology et al. Bookstore on the Ave back in the day. So I'm really dating myself now. But is that what when you say evolutionary astrology, you're...
Yeah, Jeffrey Wolf Green, Stephen Forrest. They kind of work together a lot of the time. They converge slightly, but yes. A lot of my work is based on what Jeffrey Wolf Green did. I would say I kind of put my own slant on it a little bit.
And, it's interesting because I've read both of their books, Stephen Forrest, what is it, Karma
and Reincarnation?
Something. And he has a lot of Eastern principles in his books.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
Oh, there is. Yeah.
That's taken from the Eastern tradition. So, to answer your question, I think that there has already been a lot of merging of the systems, and I think that it'll continue. But for me, there is a lot of language that's very ancient, right? When you study Vedic astrology, much like Hellenistic, right? Benefics, malefics, and
I hate that language.
I can't. That's something I can't get rid of. It's just part of it. But I think of it differently. Malefic, you can think of, yes, this planet can cause some issues, potentially some health stuff if the energy isn't managed properly, right?
Yeah.
And certainly, the big question of karma, and I know we don't have enough time to even talk about that today.
I know.
That's a whole...
Yeah.
But I do, let's see, where was I going? So, certainly looking at, Venus in the chart for relationships, but then also looking at Jupiter in a woman's chart for a traditional, quote unquote, traditional relationship. And so for me, one of the big things that I've had to really work with in this ancient language of the, quote unquote, traditional he, she relationship is how do I take what I've learned and work with what's happening today in our society. And I want to ask you about that in your book. And so for me, because I have clients of all walks of life and all sexual orientations, and so I've worked hard to try to adapt, the very traditional method of Vedic astrology to what's happening in our world today, with relationships. That's certainly evolving, and the old paradigms of, having to like get married to the opposite sex. It's changing, and we as astrologers have to respect and understand and shift this ancient language to adapt to what is evolving in our societies today. That's beautiful.
Which is exactly what I've tried to do in my book from a Western or evolutionary astrology perspective. Because, a lot of the beginners' books are going, well, this is female, this is feminine, this is masculine, this is male. And we all have everything in us, Yeah, we all have a Venus, we all have a Mars, we all have this, And it doesn't speak to kind of the all of us, really. I think a lot of this real binary language. So, my book suggests that astrologers need to just, astrology itself doesn't change. A planet is still a planet.
Right.
But for example, Venus, everybody, a lot of books just talk about Venus as it's the feminine, it's so sweet, it's so lovely and things. And the planet itself is a big hot ball of fire. And then Mars has water on it, which is traditionally feminine, and Pluto, has a heart on it, and I'm not to say that either of, but everything has a bit of, everything is more complex and diffuse than some of the ancient language in all systems of astrology allows for. So I've suggested that we just switch to using night and day, which is an ancient, the ancient Hellenistic technique of sect, just using that language. So using night for the more receptive kind of releasing kind of energy, which was definitely seen as more feminine. But we all go into the night energy at times. And then day for more action oriented, which has been seen as male. Our society, particularly I'd say Western society, has tried to block out that night energy, really. We always have lights on, we always we fear the dark, it's all that kind of energy. So I just invited people to take a more diffuse look at it, really. So, yeah.
Wonderful, because it's really needed, right? If we're going to evolve as astrologers, right, with whatever system it is that we use, it's important to have that. So when you use the word sect, and that's, I'm assuming, SECT.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? What that word means in how you're using it?
Yeah, well, I just use the language of sect, really, but the technique of sect divided the whole planet up into day and the whole chart, sorry, up into day and night, and even to the point there, if most of your planets are above the horizon, it's a day chart and you are a day person and things.
Got it.
So I find that too binary. Like, you are a day person completely. It's like saying you are all like my chart's very masculine, supposedly. I'm very much a female. I identify as a female, And then there's people who are kind of half and half, and in their chart, I mean, I don't, yeah. And it doesn't have anything to do with your sexuality. I just think it's a more helpful, and you can't tell somebody's gender from a chart. You can't look at a chart, the astrology
No,
alone, and say this is a woman's chart, this is a man's chart.
no. It's the chart of an individual's karma.
Yeah.
At least that's how I view it from the Eastern perspective, because
Well, I do too.
okay, yeah, because the
Yeah.
continuum of many lifetimes, right?
Yeah.
From the Eastern tradition,
Mhm.
there is a belief that we have multiple lifetimes, and
Yeah.
that the birth chart is the karma that we come into this lifetime with. Not all of it. That's the samchita karma.
Yeah.
That's the sum of your total lifetime karma.
Yeah.
Thank goodness we don't do that. I don't think I can handle it. But just the karmas that we're ready to experience in this lifetime. And then from birth on, all actions, because that's all really karma means, right, is actions, known or unknown, and thoughts. It's our thoughts, it's our speech,
Yeah.
and our actions that create additional karma, right, every minute of the day, that layers on top of the birth chart. And that's how I view it.
And evolutionary astrology really is exactly the same, really.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's talking about the evolution of the soul in this lifetime, learning karmic lessons, your soul's desire in this lifetime, what it wants to achieve, you know. But it's I don't know. I mean, I'm not a Vedic astrologer, but the evolutionary astrology chart sees it as kind of a spiral of evolution, triggered by, the aspects throughout your lifetime. You're born with this chart, and say when you have your Pluto square, it kind of triggers a big period of karmic growth. So, and we use the nodes as you do. We call them just the South Node and North Node, but you.
Yeah, Rahu and Ketu.
Exactly, yeah.
Not
So I think there's more similarities in a way than there are differences.
I agree. The more that I've studied Jyotish or Jyotisha, the more similarities that I see within the two systems, but then the differences too. And I do talk about that in my book. I do have a section in the first part of the book that outlines pretty clearly, okay, here are the basics between the two systems. So if somebody's coming from Western astrology and is what I like to call Vedic astrology curious,
Yeah.
right? You can easily, right out of the gate at the beginning of the book, kind of understand the differences and see if that's a place you want to go to. And then also I do have on my website, moondanceastrology.com, I do have a Vedic chart calculator on my website. So if you want to calculate your chart, you can do it on my website for free. Or I also have a worksheet in the book that allows people to take their birth data from the Western tropical zodiac and shift it easily into the Vedic system. Because that's the biggest thing, right? That people are like, oh, I'm not a Aries, now I'm a Pisces, right?
But they work differently, so
yeah, it does. And at the end of the day,
you're actually kind of both.
What?
You're actually kind of both.
Yeah. And it's all the planets in the birth chart. It's not just your sun sign.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
yeah.
all the planets. So
yeah.
I would just encourage people to not get stuck in the sun sign paradigm.
Oh, really?
You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Even as a Western astrologer, right, you have to educate people, I'm sure, on, okay, fine, your sun might be in Aries, but you have, however many planets you use, I don't know how many you use.
I use quite a lot, actually, because I use...
Do you? Do you use the asteroids and the...
I use some of the asteroids, and I use some of the newly discovered dwarf planets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot more happening there than the sun sign.
Absolutely. You could have just your sun in one sign, and then a whole stellium, like 5 planets in another sign that is going to drown out the sun sign, really. So yeah. So one question I do have about Vedic astrology is, I've had a couple of people online say, I'll look at your chart and give you a little overview of your Vedic reading, and some of the language is really negative, and I think that's put me off. How would you speak to that?
Do you have an example, or do you have a...
Well, it's kind of like, well, you've got this, and so you're kind of doomed in this area of your life. That's I can't remember the exact.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Well, you perhaps don't do. Don't do it that way. So.
That's a great question, and I think that depends on the individual. And again, I think that's the perspective of the person.
Yeah.
I don't work that way. Yeah. I really, my goal, like, I'm not going to tell you when you die. I'm not going to tell you, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to answer those questions. But there are a multitude of astrologers in India who will, because that is how they are trained and that is their perspective. Yeah. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's just different. If you go to a Vedic astrologer in India versus one in the West, it's definitely, I think, because of the karmic implications within the birth chart, it's the perspective is just different. But I don't work that way, and I tend to, again, have more of, because of my Western astrology background and my Western perspective, having grown up in the U.S., I don't have such an extreme set of language around it, and that's a great question. And sometimes, it's hard, right? Because I have learned the system traditionally, and I try not to look at my own chart. Right. As little as possible, because how you can go down that rabbit hole, right? You can see all the positive, wonderful things in someone else's chart, but when you look at your own, it's like, I'm doomed, right? And so, so we don't go there. But,
there's probably as much negative kind of talk about some of the Western astrology. Like, people go, oh, I've got Scorpio moon, so I'm always going to be this way, kind of thing.
Yeah, and you know what? There are, I think in both systems, there are biases.
Yeah.
And I've heard some people on some podcasts talk about some biases that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, honestly, because, we are all putting our pants on one leg at a time.
I think
last time I checked.
I had this one experience, I guess. It was an Indian guy, actually, and he was just offering to do some free charts for people, and I was like, okay, I'm game. And I was like, I want to go and slash my wrist, but so it's probably more cultural. And I've had a really good and lucky life, so I don't know what he was looking at, to be honest. So
maybe you had that experience,
I have had a very good one.
Yeah, I've had people come to me that have had bad experiences, with astrology in general, and my goal is for people to leave a session with me feeling way better than they did before, even though I'm not going to just blow sunshine. I can't do that. That's not good.
Oh, no, it's not. I'm not like that either. I'm kind of honest, but I'll be more like, well, this is going to be a period of challenge. I will not say it's going to be horrible when you're going to be like,
we need self-fulfilling prophecies, right? We can all do that on our own. We don't need anyone else to help us with that, right?
Exactly.
The monkey mind. yeah, but I think just having people understand when a difficult period is coming and when it's ending and when, you
Yeah,
know, right, maybe this isn't the time to start your business, you know, because it might be a challenging period or whatever, right?
exactly.
So let me ask you a question. In your book, can you talk a little bit how this is different from your first best-selling book that you have, Modern Astrology? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I myself have evolved really, but I think I see this as a development from the first one. You know, I didn't bring in the non-binary perspective. It was a bit more kind of what's been the language that's been used before. But my book, Modern Astrology, one of my main things is, as I said, to help people really feel the energies, which is why I talk about the whole universe as a pulse and a breathing thing in this second book. But in the first book, I do exercises throughout, shamanic journeys, journaling exercises and things, so people get to know, say, if they've got Venus in Scorpio or whatever, what that really feels like, rather than just a list of words.
Mm-hmm.
So both my books are very much about, I want people to really feel their chart rather than just have it explained to them, if that makes sense. So,
Experiential, experiential.
yeah, and so I think both books are really, I'm proud of both books. I feel that this one goes deeper than the first one. So, yeah.
Terrific. Thank you for sharing that. I'm excited to read it myself.
I know.
Oh,
So you talked a bit about your website, Moon Dance Astrology, was it?
yes.
Yeah. And so people can go there to book readings and things like that. Mine is louiseedington.com or cosmicowlastrology.com. I don't, or have I got that pointed to it yet? My business name has just become Cosmic Owl Astrology. I didn't have one before because I didn't find the right one. I just used
that.
I know. So I'm very kind of in the woo kind of world. When the right thing comes to me, I go with it, and that's kind of my approach to astrology. I did have I listened to you on a podcast with, what's his name again, Chris?
Chris Fisher, Turning of the Wheel.
Yeah, Turning of the Wheel. And you talked about Saturn, and there was a whole conversation. You talked about planets maturing, and you said Saturn matures at 36.
Yes, which technically is really between 35 and 36 because you know, because you're really, until you're 1, you're 0.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
So why 36? Because the Saturn cycles that I look at.
That's a good question. Nobody has ever explained that to me. I've just taken it all as fact.
Okay.
It's
and you found it.
Brihaparashara or Shastra says this is when the planet matures.
Oh.
And that's when, and I'm sure there's something behind it, but I honestly have no idea. It's a good question. I'll ask my teacher.
Well, what ages do the other planets mature at?
I have to look them all up now.
Sorry.
It's been a while.
You should buy your book to find out. I will be looking at it because that bit really caught me. I was like,
yeah, it is. It's really interesting, actually.
Because I at 30, it was 37.
Did something happen at 36 for you that was significant?
37. Well, I know 37. So I was like, oh, so maybe I got it late or something.
Maybe. It is Saturn. Sometimes he has delayed.
Yeah, because at age 37, I got married and had my first child. And
okay. So so I don't know your chart at all, and you don't have, I don't want you to, you know, that's private, whatever. But in your own mind, Eastern or Western, it doesn't matter. If Saturn rules your 7th house, or if Saturn is in your 1st or 7th house, sometimes that will give a delay of marriage until after the age of 36.
it's in my first house.
Okay, so yeah, so either system, it'll still be in your 1st house. Yeah. And so that's, yeah.
There you go.
That's why, yeah, oftentimes, you know, that's just how it works, like a lot, actually.
You see, that's one bit I'm going to really dive. You don't have to go and find all the.
I found them. Do you want to?
Yeah, go ahead then.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah. So Sun matures at age 22. Moon matures at age 24. Mars is 28. And what's interesting is that there's a specific configuration in the birth chart where Mars is involved with the 7th house or the 7th lord or some other places as well, that it does create, it does, this is part of that, you know, that part that some people might construe as negative. I've done this for a long time, and it does oftentimes bear out, not 100%, but a big percentage of the time. If a person marries before the age of 28, that they will frequently divorce before that age and so part of that maturation date of Mars is connected to that. It's called a dosha. So anyway.
Well, I don't think people should get married too young anyway. So.
I know. Well, if you think of Mars energy, right? So if you break it down, right? If you want to just break it down into the reality, if a person has a strong Mars influence to their house of partnerships, then that's fiery energy and it's passionate, but it also can be quarreling or, you know what I mean? And so once Mars matures, that dosha tends to soften and shift the energy around relationships. Mercury matures at age 32, Jupiter age 16, Venus age 25, Saturn, as I said, 36, and then Rahu and Ketu are last at 42 and 48 degrees, or 48 years of age respectively. So Rahu 42 and Ketu 48.
Oh, I'll be diving into that a little bit more deeply. Because of course the Mars one reminds me of the Saturn return.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then the Uranus opposition at 42. And
I love it. You're putting different things together.
Yeah.
Different cycles of planets, because typically I don't use the outer Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto. I typically don't. I will look at them by transit, but they're not, I just don't use them in a reading usually.
Whereas that's what I mainly look at. That's what I mainly look at, the outer one.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I love it. See? Yeah, it all works. It's just how do you want to get there?
I know. It's so fascinating. But we're probably getting really technical now for people listening. But really, you know, I just wanted us to connect. We're both published under Callisto, and you know, they're a great publishing company, and I just wanted us to support each other. Really, we're coming from different perspectives. I think our books both have something really good to offer. So I think I don't want people to get too overwhelmed, though, you know. If you're a complete beginner, start with one and then investigate the other one.
Absolutely.
But if you know astrology pretty well, I hope, you know, if you're coming from the Vedic perspective, I hope you'll explore my book or vice versa. You know, I've already shared your book with some of my followers, said, you know, if you're interested in exploring this other perspective, please give it a try, because I also know how our publisher works, and I do know that they're very you know, all our books are very well laid out, and you know, they're a great company. So do you have anything else you'd like to say about what you offer, where people can find you?
No, just moondanceastrology.com, and I'm just so grateful to have met you through this process and connected with you, and I cannot wait to read your book, because I think both systems they're unique in their own right, and they're valid, and you can tap into both of these systems and get to the same place to help yourself.
And
You know,
each one gives you a little bit extra, I think. You know,
it does. No,
yeah.
it does, because at the end of the day, we're still, it's all astrology. You
Exactly.
know? And I listen to Western astrology podcasts and I listen to Vedic astrology podcasts because I learned something new, you know, especially because what I think Western astrology is so good at, and I don't know, do you go into this at all? Like the cycles of the planets, like the cycles of Venus and the cycles of, you do.
I do.
And see, that's what I think Western astrology does so well.
Yeah.
And so, because it is really significant, and you talk about it in a little different language than, you know, than Jyotisha does. And so, I'm really looking forward to reading your book. Thank you.
And you're on Instagram too, right?
I am on Instagram, Moon Dance Astrology. Yeah.
Facebook page.
Facebook, Moon Dance Astrology. I have a Facebook page.
And me too. I'm on everything. So yeah.
Owl, is that your, or are you Louise Edington on your Facebook?
I'm Louise Edington, but my Facebook page is now Cosmic Owl Astrology. So, but if you Google my name, everything comes up under that. And it's so, Louise Edington. There we go, right at the bottom. That's the easiest way to find me.
Perfect.
But, that's it then, I think. So I'm going to stop my share, and because I can't find the not record button anymore. Oh, it's hilarious. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to
Yay!
goodbye from us.